co-ownership agreement, which sets out who is responsible for what in terms of cost of maintenance, repairs, taxes. Sometimes I find that one child has more money than the others and has to front some of the expenses, which also causes friction. Another option is putting the property into an LLC, a limited liability company. And I had one family where there was a farmhouse and 7 children.
Oh, wow.
And you can see how that could cause problems when there are so many children. And so it seemed at that time that the plan was to keep the property in place and not sell it, or not sell it until there was a good enough offer on the table. And so that parent set up an LLC, put one of the 7 children in charge, who was the responsible one that would, handle all of the administrative work. So she was the manager of the LLC. And it's possible to have that LLC be in a trust so that the trust can control the ownership. So essentially what that means is each child has a 1/7 interest in a trust, which is in an LLC. And so you can maintain control in that way because you have one trustee who is in charge of making sure the beneficiaries get their, rental income. And the manager of the LLC is handling all of the day-to-day aspects with the rental of the property. And so you can basically centralize control and management by creating an LLC, and you can further do it with a trust as well.
Very interesting point. One that I don't think people would have thought of on their own because they need legal advice to do it. But when I have a client whose parents were hoarders,
yes.
The child just overwhelmed with the amount of work that has to be done just to clean it out and find what may be of value. So why don't we talk about that for a moment, about what do you do if there's just so much stuff and it's overwhelming? Obviously, you have to hire a company to come in and sort through the stuff for you and remove the trash and then there's usually, quite often, there's mold issues that surface once it's cleaned out. So talk a little bit about that.
It can be a real mess, literally. And for clients that have a lot of assets, perhaps not, valuable, but just, hoarders, one good thing to think about before mom or dad dies is find out what is valuable from the parent, because oftentimes the parent will know what's valuable and know it exists, perhaps not know where it is. Mm-hmm. And so to the extent that you can communicate what is valuable, it makes it easier for the child when it comes time for the child to clean out the home. So personally speaking, my parents had a bunch of assets, and I told them, look, I don't know what's valuable and what's just something that was passed down from my grandparents and, is more sentimental than valuable. And so I suggested that they make basically like a spreadsheet or a Word document that shows, describe the painting, perhaps put a picture of the painting so that I can know exactly what you mean when you say painting by water, painting by the water. So I don't know what that means. There might be several paintings that are, on the beach or somewhere. And so that way I can know exactly what it is and what might be valuable, so that when the time comes and I can get an appraiser and I can say, hey, I was told this was valuable. You should research who this artist is and, let me know how much this painting is valued at so that I can appropriately report this on the inventory. So not everyone does that. And I suspect that people would have trouble getting a hoarder to do that, because if they're not cleaning their home, they're probably not going to be organized to make that type of spreadsheet. But if a child can take charge and say, well, just tell me what it is, point it out, then perhaps that would make things easier.
And sometimes the parent may not even know that it has value. They just kept it and it's tucked away somewhere. I mean, there's stacks and stacks of stuff that need to be gone through, but I've cleaned out, I've been involved with clean outs of houses where they stuffed jewels down inside.
Yeah.
And so you can't just go in and say, oh gosh, I've been dying to get rid of all those National Geographics that mom collected, because you got to shake them, because silver certificates can fall out, or we've had, I once had a house where there was a diamond ring hidden underneath the carpet, and it was appraised at more than the house was worth. So you never know where your parents, especially if they have dementia or Alzheimer's of some variety, it can be a real challenge with that. So I think planning it ahead, if the children can face the fact that someday the parents are not going to be there, it's a good idea to try to get as much down as on paper as you said, so that they at least have some sort of roadmap to go through, because some of these
Absolutely.
houses really be crazy. Yeah. So what about existing debt and the bills that have to be paid? Maybe your parents had credit card debt, or I don't know, whatever it might be.
So nobody can inherit until all of the debts are paid off. Mm-hmm. So if you have a solvent estate, and by solvent, I mean the assets exceed the debts, then the beneficiaries under the estate plan, or the heirs, if there's no estate plan, can only receive after the debts are paid. So essentially, you need to pay all the credit card bills, pay off the final medical bills, the funeral expenses, any probate fees, accounting fees. Oftentimes with probate, you need to hire either an attorney or an accountant to prepare something called an accounting to show the court or to show the beneficiaries of a trust that money has come in and money has gone out for these purposes that are legitimate. And it's basically accounting to show like a checkbook, money in and money out. And then once the debts are paid off, then the beneficiaries can receive their inheritance either outright, meaning they can get a check and deposit it into their bank account, or in trust, meaning a new trust is created for the benefit of someone, and they become the beneficiary of that trust, and then they can receive distributions for various purposes.
Interesting. Well, so assume when your parents have passed and you have to go to the house, maybe you have a sibling or two, and where would you start looking for these records, assuming they may or may not have a computer with information on it? I know we did a house once where the mother simply put any piece of mail stacked up on the floor, and it had not been gone through. Her sons came up to move her out, and her son, there was a stack of mail with credit cards in it and overdue bills, and that's easy to see, but parents
right.
will hide things because they think whatever may happen. And so what do you suggest? What have you seen some interesting places to hide things, and what do you recommend to children who have to start the process cold?
So the first thing you end up doing is after you're qualified as the personal representative, or if you're the trustee, you forward the mail to your home so that you start getting the decedent's mail. You'll ultimately get bills, you'll get financial information, so bank statements, perhaps life insurance information. You'll get their 1099s for tax filing purposes. So you always want to look at the decedent's cell phone, if they have one, especially if they have a smartphone, and if you're able to get into it. You want to look at their computer. You want to look at tax transcripts. You can request tax transcripts to see if they are current on filing their taxes. And that's an obligation that the trustee or the personal representative needs to do, because again, you can't distribute the assets of the estate until all debts are paid, and one major debt are taxes. There oftentimes are original estate planning documents held in an attorney's vault file, which that's how we handle most of our clients' documents. They leave them here with us. So clients will say, "Mom died, what do I do?" And my first thought is, well, let me check our vault and make sure that we have the original documents for filing. If you keep your own estate planning documents, I always suggest that you put them in a fireproof box and not a safe deposit box. And the reason is a safe deposit box is very difficult to get into when the decedent dies, unless a joint owner is listed on the box. And there are some statutes in some states that allow a limited entering of the safe deposit box for the sole purpose of finding a will, not for inventorying the box. because the only person that can inventory the box is the personal representative of the estate. And so the only way you can get appointed as personal representative is if you have the original will, or if there was no original will or it can't be found, then you have to probate the estate as an intestate estate, one where there is no estate plan. And the presumption is that if the will cannot be found, then the presumption is that the decedent destroyed it, even though that's not always the case.
Excuse me. Michelle, unfortunately, we're coming up to the close, but you have just shared so much valuable information. I'd really like you to take a moment to include an email address for you and perhaps the website so that adult children who are listening can get more information. And they need to understand that you are not licensed in all states, but you are extremely knowledgeable. So I appreciate your joining me. And if you could share the website and an email address with the listeners, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. I'm licensed in Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and my email address is mchapin, MCHAPIN, at PaleyRothman.com. That's PaleyRothman.com. And the firm's website is PaleyRothman.com, PaleyRothman. Thank you so much for letting me talk today, Debbie. It was a pleasure.
Well, we're going to have you come back and do part 2 of this one because this, well, you know, when you're going through the emotions of losing the parent and then you realize you have to deal with everything. And if the parent was not a planner, it can make it a challenge. So I really appreciate your taking the time out to talk to people about the nitty gritty, everyday stuff about dealing with handling the assets of your parents. And some people are always surprised. They said they didn't know their mom or dad had that much. So
yeah,
you run into all kinds. But thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be sure to have you back again, Michelle.
Thank you so much.